Hello everyone, today we'll be doing a killer tier list. This is based on my opinion and more than 2,000 hours in the game. So without further ado, let's get into it. And something else I just wanted to mention, I know how serious players can get with their directional killers, and if your killer was ranked not correctly or you think your killer is more powerful, then that is based on your opinion and your opinion only. So without further ado, let's get into the tier list. First up, we have the Nurse. Nurse is the best killer in the game. There's no arguing to that. You could say Spirit is better, but Nurse just can be kind of more broken than the Spirit, as her power can allow her to teleport further, reduce the fatigue time, and even get extra blinks. So that's why I think she's S tier. Then after that we have the Spirit. Spirit has a very good power, and that can be very confusing. That could cause people to simply think what they don't know what to do. If you're at a drop pallet and the Spirit stands there, looks like she's phasing, it's a 50-50 chance if she really is or if she's just faking it. So the survivor has to take a 50-50 and either vault over the pallet, which they could get grabbed or hit, or not vault over the pallet, which if the Spirit was actually phasing, she could get a hit. So that's why the Spirit feels also kind of broken, but not as bad as the Nurse. Moving on from that, we have Freddy Krueger. Oh boy. Freddy was originally bad, and then nerfed into garbage, and then reworked, and then nerfed into, amazing. Just was reworked into amazingness, and then was nerfed into, I don't know, because his nerf really didn't do anything to stop him from being the best killer from one of the best killers in the game. Because his power is very powerful. That's what every killer's power should be like, powerful. And his power just, oh boy. He can set traps or fake pallets, depending on which one you prefer, that can cause survivors to either drop fake pallets and get hit or downed, or step over his snares and get a movement speed penalty. And his add-ons just continue to make him a more viable killer, but nothing that could drastically move him up like the Nurse or the Spirit. His ultra rares are just very disappointing, as one of his ultra rares just block the exit gates for 15 seconds after the gates are opened. I mean, the black box was so much better before its nerf, where it just screw up the obsession. And the paintbrush is probably his best add-on that's ultra rare, but it's still not that great, especially for how good Freddy is. Then, in the first of the A tier, or the beginning of the A tier, I'm going to have to go with our good friend Hillbilly. Now, the Hillbilly has been through a lot also, and his power just makes a killer that is able to move around very quickly, an instant down, this chainsaw, and stop things like generators from getting completed. And that's good and all, but his nerf kind of just made him bad, or a worse of a killer. They removed most of Hillbilly's best add-on combinations besides Curve Saw and Bumper, and his add-ons are just disappointing now, and his power can be deactivated if he tries to use it too many times, or he continuously revs. So that's why I think he's here in the beginning of the A tier. Next up in the A tier, I am going to have to go with the Huntress, as her power can allow her to basically obliterate the survivors by cutting off access to windows and pallets. but that doesn't really mean that she's the best killer in the game. She suffers from a 45-meter lullaby radius and also a movement speed decrease of 110, which means if she runs out of her hatchets and she's not running one of the ultra rare add-ons, the Soldier's Petit, then she's just a 110 killer without any power at all. And her 45-meter terror radius, or not terror radius, but lullaby, that's both distance and directional, can allow the survivors to hide before she can even arrive to find them. And that's why I think Huntress is number 5. Next up after Huntress, this is probably opinionated, but we have the Trickster. Now, Trickster has seen so much in the short time that he has been with us in Dead by Daylight. I just gotta say that Trickster was bad, considered the worst killer in the game. Then he was buffed to be like an okay killer, and then he received a few tweaks that made him a better killer. So that's why I guess I had to put him in the A tier, because of how his power allows him to shut down loops if used correctly, and he can also, if he lands a certain amount of hits, can use infinite blades or knives for a short amount of time that can obliterate survivors if they cannot find a wall to hide against or anything like that. And then in the end of the A tier, this might be more opinionated than anything, but I'm going to have to go with the Doctor. Now, I am a Doctor main, and a lot of people will disagree, saying the Doctor is D tier, the Doctor is C tier, he's a bad killer, blah, 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 blah. But if you really think about it, and you really, really, really just have watched the live streams that I've done with my friend over on his channel, the Doctor's not weak. He's actually really powerful, and if you can use his power to his max potential, then he can be a really good killer in general. As the Doctor's power is pretty powerful in general. Then next up after the Doctor, we have the good old, next step after the Doctor, this might be more of a dicey territory, but I'm going to have to start off with the Deathslinger. His power is pretty good, as it allows him to basically snipe people, because I guess maybe either Deathslinger is just really good with a rifle, or he just plays a lot of Call of Duty, but either way, his power allows him to basically hit people and reel them in. The reason why Deathslinger is not higher is because his power can be countered by long loops and pallets. If the pallet is powerful and it's at a loop that the Deathslinger cannot walk around, or it's not like unsafe pallet, then Deathslinger will either have to swing, which makes the survivor not injured, or he will have to take a lengthy stun and then have to reload from his power. So Deathslinger is pretty good, but pretty bad at the same time. He also has a 110 movement speed, which kind of hurts him in a way. And there's no way for the Deathslinger to stall objective completion, besides being able to snipe people on open lands and second floors if generators are up there. For example, on the Dead Dog Saloon. Then after Deathslinger, this is also maybe a little opinionated. I'm going to have to go with Nemesis. Nemesis is, besides being very bald, he's also pretty okay as a killer. His tentacle allows him to whip survivors and injure them, and then eventually downing them. He has zombies that roam the map, and also top of all of that, he also has a very cool breaking animation where he can break the pallet by just banging on it with his fists. So what is not to like about this killer? Well, first of all, he has to land 3 hits with his tentacle before he can pick up the survivor to hook them. That's if he chooses to use his tentacle. His tentacle gives survivors a free speed boost after infecting them, and they can use the vaccine to cleanse or get rid of his T virus. The major weakness he suffers from is that even though he is a ranged killer and he has the standard 115 movement speed, his main problem is that his power needs multiple hits to become useful, and his zombies that roam the map are very, they're very RNG based. So that's why he's there in the B tier. Next up on the B tier, we're going to have to go with the Executioner. Pyramid Head is one of the more balanced killers in the game, in my opinion, and he's not weak nor powerful. He's just out there as a killer that you can play as and have fun. The only thing that I want to mention about Pyramid Head is he can break the rules of how do you play the game. He can use cages, and he has a free Mori in his power if survivors step on his gulag juice, and all that kind of stuff. His power is kind of difficult to get survivors to walk in his trails unless he knows exactly where the survivor will run, which kind of sets up a little bit of skill cap for him. But overall, he's a pretty good killer. Not that he can get around the map quickly, which is his main weakness, is gen rushing, and he does have to rely on late game and 3 gens to be able to get a good kills. So that's why he's there in the B tier. Next up after him, we have the Plague. The Plague is one of those killers that are okay in my opinion. She has a balanced power that doesn't really have any negatives, but good potential, as she can infect survivors and cause them to become broken and not be able to heal. This also causes them to be able to spread their sickness to other survivors and forcing them to waste time cleansing at fountains or risk being one-shot. If she obtains Corrupt Purge, she can hit survivors from a distance, and she also has the standard 115 movement speed. Her main problem is her stalling. If the survivors choose not to cleanse out fountains, then she's basically a killer with kind of no power. Besides that, she will be able to one-hit down survivors because they're broken. She can't really stall objective completion in any other way besides forcing the survivors to cleanse when they can choose if they want to or not versus forcing them to have to. It's kind of 50-50 based if she's able to get a good game like that, so that's why I think she's B tier. Next up in the B tier, I'm going to have to go with the Demogorgon. Now, you might be saying, why did you put the Demogorgon so low? Because I thought you said if the survivors can get across the map, the killer can get across the map further, then wouldn't that be better? Well, the thing is, unlike Hillbilly, Nurse, Spirit, and Freddy, his power does not allow him to continuously travel. The survivors can easily destroy his portals, and if they do, then he has to spend time setting up his portals, which is hard for the killer and would put a lot of pressure on him, and he can be gen rushed like every other killer. His shred attack is only really good on long loops that are straight and short loops that curve. Then he will have a substantial problem with trying to get a kill or two if he's trying to use his shred. Next up after the Demogorgon, I think this is where the Hag goes. Hag has weaknesses. She can be looped fairly easily, and her traps allow her to teleport wherever they are triggered. And the main weakness that she suffers is her 110 movement speed and her ability to cause gen rushing by she doesn't have any way of slowing down objective completion. So this is why Hag is in the B tier. And then second to finally in the B tier, we have the Twins. The Twins, the reason why I put them so low is because they're mostly used for camping, and that's why I don't really like playing against the Twins. The only thing that Twins really do that I've seen as as non-viable tactic is camp. They leave Charlotte at the hook, and they send Victor out, and then the Charlotte just camps, and then when someone goes for a save, Killer Instinct activates. The player switches over to Charlotte, and then is able to continuously camp. And the problem with that is usually when killers camp, the survivors can just gen rush. But how can you gen rush when one killer's camping and then there's another part of the killer that can go over and prevent generators from getting done? Its wins are just so unfun to play against when they do this tactic, and that's why I'm putting them low, as they can stall objective completion in a way, but it's just the way that they play is very poor versus other killers. Finally, in the B tier, we have Ghosty. The reason why I put Ghostface a little lower is because he can stalk survivors, reduce his terror radius to 0. The problem with him, though, is that he has to spend time setting up. Not only on top of all of that, he also has to stalk survivors for 4 seconds without being seen, and he can also be kicked out of his power if the survivors look at him for a short period of time. That's why he's just so low, in my opinion. Next up after him, we have the Blight. The reason why I put Blight lower than other killers is because he can get around the map, although he has to bump around obstacles to get to where he's supposed to go. And he's definitely not as bad as on the public test build, but he still has the problems with trying to get around obstacles and stuff. He can be looped like most killers, and besides being able to J-flick, his power doesn't really allow him to hit survivors easily if there are curved walls or long pallets that he cannot use his power at. Next up after him in the C tier, we have Myers. Myers' power is very disappointing. The thing about Myers is that, sure, he's able when he's in Tier 1 to get some gen grabs and potentially some hits without the survivors knowing. But the thing about Myers is that once he starts tearing up, his tearing up is a little different than other killers. As then when he gets to Tier 2, he's a basic 115 killer who is able to hit survivors and vault windows slightly faster. Then in Tier 3, he gets that exposed, he moves faster, he has an extended lunge, and he vaults very quickly. But the problem is Tier 3 only lasts for 60 seconds without add-ons. Sure, maybe if Myers was running Tombstone or Infinite Tier 3, I could put him all the way up in the S tier, but just without add-ons, his power is just kind of not as good than other powers in the game. Then after him, I'm going to have to go with the Pig. The Pig's main strength is being able to put on reverse bear traps, reduce the terror radius to 0, and be able to stall the game by reverse bear traps, and also because you can ambush survivors, which gives an extended lunge and a faster movement speed. However, her ambush is not suitable for every situation. Crouching reduces her movement speed to about 3.9, I think it is, or like 4.0. About a little bit over the same movement speed as survivors. And reverse bear traps are very luck based on how long they stall for. The survivor could search the box and get the trap off in the first search, or they could never find the key and die. So that's why I think Pig is just super below average, but not the worst killer, unlike the rest that we have. Next up in the C tier, we have the Oni. Oni is able to insta-down, and that's kind of the only reason why he's in the C tier. His basic power allows him to absorb enemy blood orbs, which he can use his power for 45 seconds, which allows him to basically be a hillbilly without an overheat limit and a weaker Tier 3 Myers. The problem with that, however, he can only use his power for 45 seconds without add-ons, and even with add-ons, it's not really extended that much. Oni is just so basic with how he could be used, it's not really fun to play as him. Next up after that, we have Leatherface. Oh boy. The main problem with Leatherface, besides that he can become Basement Bubba, is that he has a power that does not grant him exactly anything. The only reason, once again, similar to Oni, that he's in the C tier is because he can gain an insta-down chainsaw. However, the chainsaw, not like Billy's, but it can't be used to sprint long distances, and his power is also pretty disappointing. And how good that he can get survivors down. He gets Gen Rush too, and if he bumps into an obstacle, he'll be stuck in a mode where the killer will be unable to move or interact with survivors. Survivors can run into the killer for some reason to get instantly down, but not like that's going to happen on a regular basis. Pallets are not usually an issue with Leatherface unless he gets stunned. However, windows are his main weakness as an endless safety for survivors if they vault one. Leatherface will be forced to be able to use his mace to land quick attacks, but will be unable to use his chainsaw because he will go into a stun and will not be able, once again, to do anything. His power's kind of just okay, and there are only really two reasons why he's up here. One, because he has an instant down, and two, because this poor guy has introduced us to one of the best perks in the game, barbecue and chili. So that's kind of the only reason why he's up here. Then moving into the D tier. First up in the D tier, we have the Clown. Now, the Clown was changed not too long ago, about maybe half a year ago, to have gas bottles, which increases movement speed by 5%, or actually 10%, for 5 seconds. That's not going to do anything. And he can also run out of bottles where he'll have to spend 3 seconds reloading his bottles. Will have a slowed down movement speed, will not be able to interact with survivors unless he cancels it. The Clown is a loop stopper, and he doesn't really live up to that name. Unlike people like Freddy or, even Leatherface, Clown has these problems where survivors can run away from his bottles, and he can get Gen Rush and has no way of finding survivors quicker other than using his movement speed bottles. So, Clown is bad, but not the worst killer. Next up, we have the Wraith. Our favorite door-to-door salesman has returned to see the light of day again. Once used to be the worst killer in the game, and then the second worst after Freddy was introduced. And after Freddy was changed, he became then, once again, one of the worst killers in the game until something else happened. He got some buffs that made him a more viable killer and that moved him up the tier list a little bit, but nothing drastic that could make him a better killer. His power is going kind of transparent, and he also has a quicker movement speed, and he does not have a terror radius. He has the issue of that he's not able to find survivors quickly, and he also has the problem with his bell warning, which makes him unable to hit a survivor when he's invisible, and require a 3-second process of binging his bell to become uninvisible out of his cloaked power to be able to interact with survivors. Besides being able to pull people out of lockers, he can't really interact with survivors in his cloaked manner. So that's why I think he's great as the third worst killer in Dead by Daylight. Next up, after the Wraith, we're going to have to go with the Legion. Legion, over the few years that they have been with us in Dead by Daylight, has seen so much bull that I don't even know where to begin. Typically, we expect killers to be able to use their power efficiently, and not only efficiently, but to actually be powerful. The Legion is just bad. The Legion's power allows him to move at 130% movement speed and be able to put survivors instantly into deep wounds. He cannot down survivors, and he cannot do really anything besides, once again, similar to the Wraith, being able to pull people out of lockers while in his fast mode. After exiting his mode, he suffers from a 4-second stun duration where the killer will be unable to interact with survivors in any way. And not only that, but on top of everything, he also has to wait 15 seconds without add-ons or more for his power to recharge. Even his add-ons are kind of disappointing, as they don't really provide any more benefits than hitting survivors and then hitting survivors. And maybe, yeah, the deep wound timer add-ons are pretty good, but really, the add-ons that make it longer for the survivor to mend and stuff like that, it's just not good. And then finally, we come to the worst killer, the Trapper. The worst killer of Dead by Daylight. The Trapper is such a bad killer not because of his power, mostly just as how he fell behind, and because of his power. The Trapper's ability allows him to set bear traps, which can catch survivors and end chases quickly and cut off access to windows and pallets. However, besides that, his power is pretty bad, as he has to spend time setting up in the beginning. He can get gen rushed. He has no way of finding survivors quicker. Not only that, but he has some interesting add-on perk combinations, and he is fun to play sometimes. But fun does not mean viable. He is easily bullied, and his power does not grant him anything besides being the most standard killer in Dead by Daylight. Also, he can only carry one trap at a time, and if he tries to walk over a pallet or a window that he accidentally put down the trap, he will be stuck in an animation where he will have to untrap himself, and if he's carrying anyone, he will immediately drop them. He also can no longer set traps in certain areas, and his traps can be disarmed, and the survivor can escape out of the trap themselves, and a teammate can help them escape the trap if they're nearby. And if someone gets trapped across the map, you can't really do anything. This is why Trapper is just such a bad killer to play as and against. He's not fun, and he's just disappointing overall. Really hope to see some love to this killer, but since all the survivors are early ranks think that he's such a hard killer to play against and all that kind of stuff, I don't really think he's going to receive any love anytime soon. Well, that wraps up my tier list for everything, all killers in the game of Dead by Daylight. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe and share with all your friends. And don't forget to hit the bell icon if you want to get updated whenever we drop a new video. Thank you for